Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. We're going to be looking at the Five of Wands. Five of Wands. And I was thinking about this today and I like the number cards. I like seeing the number cards as places, which, I just always like to iterate the concept behind this. I think that I think that places in the physical world are a really useful symbol for places in the internal world in our mind, right? So like when we are in a mood, when we are in a bad mood, it's like I imagine that as us being in a location. And when we're in a good mood, we're not in that location that we were when we were in the bad mood. We are now in the good location, Um, and I really enjoy exploring the pip cards as destinations. And now, if you can actually go to the destination, if you can actually go to that place, it's a great form of like active living meditation because you don't even have to you don't have to meditate. You don't have to sit there and close your eyes and try and take yourself somewhere in your mind. You just have to be in that place because it's already going to reflect like different things in you. And yeah, this might be one of the trickier ones for some people. There's certainly this is certainly like a low neuroticism destination. So people that are a little bit higher on neuroticism might feel pretty uncomfortable both in a strip club and in a fight club, or at a boxing match, let's say. And I think it's kind of interesting that as far as spectator sports of generally you know that involve very few people, like unlike sports teams, stuff like that. Um, the I think there's something. I think there are many interesting things that these two types of places have in common, and yeah, like violence and sex. You know, they're super basic. Uh, Mind you, it doesn't surprise me that there are Twitch live stream categories now that involve things like watching someone eat dinner, and you essentially watch them eat dinner, right? Like, obviously, there are many other activities that I imagine could, with time, fall into these categories. But there's something about there's something about fighting and fucking, uh, or at least insofar as they are represented in organized fights and strip clubs, because neither of them are actually fully fighting or fucking, right? Like strip clubs, I mean, unless you're going to some private sex club, and I know they have those in some countries, depending on where you are in the world. There are always different limitations on what is and is not cool in terms of how sexual acts can be depicted, or how simulations of sexual acts can be depicted, and then also of how violence can be depicted. If you go to a boxing match, like, it's not an actual fight. It's not the real raw animalistic experience that human beings have when they're actually fighting, especially fighting for their lives. It's a controlled version of that. There's timers, there's referees, there's rules. There are places you can't hit each other. Even in something like the UFC, which when it started was largely it still wasn't a no holds barred, so to say, event, but it was it was a lot more freer. You could do bare knuckle. There was almost everything was on the table. It was much closer to a real fight. Still limited though. And then also in strip clubs, you you're not actually watching the real act. You're watching I mean, like, the reason that strip clubs have dance poles is because they generally don't have actual penises, right? And the pole is there as, like, the sort of transmutation of that aspect of the sex act. Obviously, Five of Wands, I mean, this is one of the things where I was like, yeah, I wonder if anyone in the short video will just immediately immediately imagine some strip club with like 5 stripper poles on the stage or something and 5 dancers. But it's kind of interesting how both the threat of violence in the fight scenario, is something that highly neurotic people are sensitive to, and then also the threat of all the threats that are associated with like uncontrolled sexual acts, so like infectious diseases, and then unwanted pregnancy, all of the kind of possessive rages, maybe not possessive rages, but the kind of the kind of emotional modalities that people can become possessed by, which again, like, kind of scary to a more highly neurotic individual. So acknowledging that, nonetheless, being able to go to one of these places, I think is really enlightening about it's really enlightening to how people objectify two of these two incredibly sort of raw, animalistic, instinctive kind of activities, how they objectify the activities and the individuals involved in them, but both from the point of view of the people carrying out the act as well as the people watching. So in a lot of ways you could find out a lot about sex by what people are willing to pay for to experience. And also, obviously, it's like it's only a certain type of person that goes to strip clubs or that goes to fights. And I think in both cases it's a really interesting mix of, like, how could I put it? Like, both organized fights and strip clubs have, like, they're fake. They're a simulation. It's not the actual thing. So in a way, the people that participate, as individuals that are going to these places to be entertained by this, they're engaging in a type of self-deception. But at the same time, going to fights and going to strip clubs are some of the most unique types of places to go in a civilized environment. In a city, almost every other place could be argued is the real self-deceptive environment, where everyone's getting along, where everyone's suppressing all of their sort of animal urges. And so an argument could also be made that at least in a strip club or at a fight, you're the closest to your real nature, your animal nature, which doesn't, I don't think the argument needs to imply that is all we are, but I think insofar as the kind of people who like to go to a fight or to a strip club because they like to at some time indulge that part of themselves, like indulge the id, the unconscious, that animal instinctive side. Again, the wands, I always like to think of the wands as like there's a forest, it's dark, it's confusing, there are sounds coming from everywhere, it's full of animals that are operating on instinct. You need to operate on instinct. Like, navigating it is this, it's a thing that benefits the most from tapping into our animal selves. It's a creative act in the purest sense of the word. It's not like an intellectual, it's not creation through an act of calculating or designing something. It's an actual spontaneous act of, activity, behavior being created by the individual. And then obviously sexuality, like reproduction, mating, that kind of animalistic mating in the forest, and then also fighting for your life, hunting, like trying to catch things to kill them and eat them, or running away from things that are trying to catch you and eat you, right? So those are like, yeah, so these, fight clubs, boxing matches, strip clubs, things like that, and in a way could be argued are the most real insofar as the unsuppressed subconscious is concerned. And yeah, and I think the really enlightening experience could be from not just watching the audience, like what I was saying, I think kind of applied to the kind of people who would be frequenting these places. So not just that, and then also not just the performers or the entertainers or the fighters, because they are also engaging in something that is, could be described as not being normal. It's like the average person doesn't beat the shit out of people for money. The average person does not take off their clothes and simulate the sexual act and like seduce people, but at a barrier, like, and strangers for money. Like these seem like pretty obscure things to do to make a living, but at the same time, again, for those people, it could be like, this is probably one of the most closest activities to, that raw fucking human behavior, right? That is somewhere within all of us. So watching the interplay between the audience and the performers, because in both cases there are degrees of adaptation occurring between both parties, right? And I would argue that for the most part they happen unconsciously, or the most valuable lessons that you can learn are probably behaviors that are governed unconsciously, both by the audience and the performers. But also, just the way different fighters behave when they're walking out onto the ring, the way they communicate with the audience, the way they interact with the person they're fighting. These things they've all been shaped by many years of these types of activities being consistently popular amongst human beings, right? So there are like, do you hit a guy when he's down? Do you, like how far do you take the simulated sexual act on stage? Like the kind of limitations that the performers put on themselves are, their best interpretation of what they think is the ideal way of interacting with that audience insofar as those acts are concerned. So I think there's a lot that could be learned about our current time and place culturally insofar as it relates to that kind of animalistic subconscious. And for the most part, I think it could be a pretty sad lesson about alienation, isolation, objectification, but it's a good lesson to learn. It's an important lesson. I think it's talking about it is one thing, but seeing like a miserable, desperate fighter or exotic dancer interacting with an audience that is there to like watch them fail or watch them suffer or embarrass themselves is like, that is a powerful like aspect of humanity to witness, and like I said at the beginning, it's like, it's something that you could certainly think about and consider, but being there, and I haven't been to a fight or a strip club in a pretty long time. Last time I think I went to a fight actually was a charity event, and it was called Girl Fight. It was like female boxers. So in both cases, it was like women on stage. But I've also been to a couple like underground, illegal boxing matches back in the day. And I think it's kind of like one of those. I never had the scared straight kind of cliche school thing. I guess in some places, the cops come and take you down to the prison and introduce you to some convicts and you hear their stories or something. I've never experienced that, but I think this would certainly be a version of that kind of activity, right? It's not going to be it's not going to be some wonderful experience necessarily. Although there are some fights where you get to see like champions and heroes, and they fight with respect for each other, and they hug at the end of the fight. And there are also like exotic performers that just take that activity to the level of an art form, right? But I think those are the sort of rare experiences. We're not gambling on coming across one of those. But yeah, seeing those activities, if you're not too neurotic, if you have the opportunity within the potential restrictions of the epidemic, I can't remember which one it is anymore. I think it's certainly something interesting to consider and potentially entertain as a learning experience. Now some people are going to be like, yes, learning experience, that's right. Nerdy Tarot mentioned this would be, oh no, I don't like going to strip clubs. I'm just here to learn about the human soul. Anyways, thanks for listening. I'm going to wrap it up here. Drop me a like if you enjoyed the video. Feel free to comment. Free reading for your chance to win a free one-on-one reading. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Talk to you then. Take care.